Hello, so I just uploaded a video on the system, just a micro example of what governments are doing globally. The example was with respect to education in the United Kingdom, which I would consider myself, with respect to the kind of financial standpoint of understanding the loans and the bursaries and the grants and what courses are available and even things pertaining to international years where you can and can't go. Somewhat of an expert, as I've been involved for in excess of a decade now, and I just uploaded something because I see things now that are so blatant with respect to whether it's discrimination or some kind of political injustice or outright hypocrisy, contradictions. They're gaining so much confidence, those that govern the realm and create these kinds of policies, this legislation, the martial lawing of society, I like to call it. That they no longer need to hide the true meaning under cover of some falsified premise. It's all in your face for you to see. And I gave an example in this video of how in the United Kingdom, with respect to grants and bursaries, and Wales is an example I use because recently there has been this new front to attack natives and nationals by slicing and dicing the United Kingdom into Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and England. The partition of Africa is an example that a lot of people always refer to with respect to so-called colonialism. The artificial drawing of borders. It's not a singular example. It's not something that is in any way unique. It's just something that academics like to focus on because, when they undertake PhDs or any kind of postgraduate courses, they need to receive funding for that, and they'll only receive funding for something that sponsors a narrative, and that isn't applicable to humanity specifically. If I was to write a paper about corruption, if I was to write a paper about cobalt mining in the Congo, and talk about how big companies like Tesla are murdering tens of thousands of people each and every week, literally, no one's going to fund that. Because the trusts that allocate these funds derive from corporations that are intertwined with this kind of exploitation. So you find that the system always produces material pertaining to whatever the status quo demand, and it's a scary thing. It's a really scary thing. It's manipulating history. You learn about scenarios, historically speaking, from the information that you have available to you. But if the information is only aligned to what has been pre-approved and accepted, you're always going to get a very tainted perception of the truth, as far from the truth as humanly possible. But what is happening is, division is just the ultimate form of control, and the United Kingdom is no different to the Soviet Union, it's no different to the European Union, and it's no different to the partition of Africa in the late 19th century and throughout the 20th century. Nothing is different with respect to all those examples. The Soviet Union during its so-called collapse, which was an artificial demise, because the Soviet Union was the United States is the Soviet Union is China, they're all one entity, they're all one globalized entity. There are no nation states. This is all just theatre for the proles, for the public to lap up and believe in, to create the division that I'm talking about here. Following the so-called collapse of the Soviet Union, they drew borders with Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, you name it, it's there. And the borders are so convoluted that they're a mess, frankly. You have so many exclaves and enclaves that often in places, I'll give an example, in Kyrgyzstan you have to drive through Tajikistan to enter the rest of your country because the only road that goes down to the Batken region goes through Tajikistan. So that's how insane the borders are. And do take a look at Google Maps, I'm sure you'll be very interested. The European Union is the same now. The European Union was created as a mechanism by which to allow lobbyists a platform to subject all governments to their wants and desires and their demands. Instead of having to go to each individual nation and have an appointment with each individual government and try and lobby them to buy your product or to allow you to build a pipeline through said territory, you can do all of that under one roof, two roofs, Strasbourg and Brussels. That was the aim of the European Union, and that's fact. The man that funded the European Union created it on an economic footing. It wasn't, for so-called equality. And they utilise the argument that because of the European Union, there was peace and all that kind of stuff. It's total nonsense. It's total nonsense. How can you predict the future? You can't say because there's peace, it's a result of the fact that there's this economic partnership at play. And it's not a partnership, of course. And the European Union, as a classic liberal entity, and the liberal entity is, of course, far right, which is communism and fascism. But they brand themselves as being accepting of all, except the native citizens, of course. So what the European Union does is it says, we're sponsoring all kinds of individual cultures, ethnicities, identities. Equity and equality is at the forefront. But realistically, the European Union is the exact contrary to that premise, is it not? It's diluting cultures and bringing them under one banner. That is the aim, that's its purpose. And without going on a tangent, I'll return to the United Kingdom. That was the aim when borders were drawn with Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. Don't you find it very strange that a little country like Great Britain was able to conquer supposedly 25% of the global landmass, all kinds of conflicts in all kinds of corners of the world, and yet they couldn't conquer Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland? Do you actually believe that? The reason that exists is the same reason that the Channel Islands exists and the Isle of Man exists. It's creating pockets for certain benefits. Channel Islands and Isle of Man are, of course, financial tax havens, basically independent countries, albeit they get the benefits of the United Kingdom. And they're essentially enforcing that desire for both Scotland and Wales, and probably soon to be Northern Ireland too. And at any point they can strike a match and flare some kind of revolt or revolution or some onslaught of criticism, explosions, of social explosions. Sorry, a little bit tired, but you see the point. And with education, there's no difference there. So the video that you may look at on the channel, it's both on BitChute and YouTube, I don't know how long for, is a video showing that there are bursaries issued by the Welsh Government with respect to PGCEs, which are teacher training programs, postgraduate programs, people that wish to become teachers. And money is available to every single culture in the world. And I'm not talking about a British cultural background, I'm talking about any culture in the world, because the Welsh Government's policy, and it may be with respect to the entirety of the United Kingdom, is that if you live in the UK for 3 years, you're entitled to the full student funding, which is insane, of course. You can get a work visa and then you can get 3 years of funding where you're paid, with respect to Wales, £18,000, actually in excess of that, almost £19,000 a year for doing nothing, which is about 70% more than what you get in England. So in England, the student rate for postgrad is a lump sum of approximately £12,500, maybe a little bit more if you're in London. And out of that you pay your tuition, right? But in Wales, if you're a Welsh resident, whatever that means entirely, you can be from Brazil and having lived in Wales for those years I specified, you're technically a Welsh resident, and you'll be entitled to £19,000, while someone 1 metre across the so-called border in England, and also Northern Ireland, will be entitled to the 12 to 13,000. As someone that may have lived there their entire life and their family go back 300-400 years and are classically British. And the aim, of course, is, aside from the moneyed aspect, it's all a corrupt scheme. Higher education, just like in the US with the Ivy Leagues, charging people in excess of $60,000 to $70,000 a year, which, thank God, we haven't reached yet, but we are reaching that point. The aim is to accumulate as much debt as possible. The government loans the institutions, or the government is loaning the money by banks to pay billions of dollars in tuition grants and bursaries, most of which never gets paid back. The debt account is in excess of 50 billion. And of course, in order to heighten that debt, for the banks to gain as much profit as possible, for the moneylenders to work their magic, they want a greater target audience. They want a larger market share. So instead of offering these as it should be offered, because it's in effect taxpayers' money, it should be offered to nationals, but it's offered to everybody. Having been for 3 years, or if you're international, you'll get all kinds of bursaries, irrespective if you haven't done the 3 years of residency prior to your application. And these grants, like I said, are available to every single group except white British people. Every single group in the world. It literally specifies in writing anyone from Asia, or anyone deemed Asian, anybody that is black anywhere in the world, anyone that is Jewish, anyone that is a gypsy. In fact, the only group that comes under the banner white, the heading white, is a gypsy or an Irish traveller. And of course, Jewish people are probably the highest paid ethnic group in the world, so I can't really understand why £1,000 bursary is required for them. Not to say that there aren't rich people in all groups. The group allows everyone from Asia, wealthy Chinese, to attain these grants and bursaries. The only people that are not allowed to obtain this money, which is derivative of taxes paid by the population, are the majority of the population themselves. The majority of people in Wales are white, Welsh, British nationals, and they are not eligible for any of these grants, even though these grants are paid for by their own taxes from their own country. And this is a micro example. I could do videos of a billion examples. It's the world is coming to the ultimate super-communist, socialist, dystopian standpoint, where you have this fear-induced media at every level of the day, whether it's on your laptop or phone. Of course, if you've been watching the news, I don't, but it flashes up on your phone, on your laptop. Every time there's something negative, they push it at the right time just to ruin or have some psychologically inducing effect on people's lives. The plane crash in Azerbaijan, which was a total scam, just like the Malaysian flights in Ukraine, the flight in South Korea that crashed, whether that's natural or not, was intended to create this fear. It happened around Christmas, loads of people cancel, they don't go and see their families. It's the same premise as the COVID scam, restricting people's movements, stopping people from interacting socially, and consequently diminishing people's average IQ and making them more malleable and open for the subservience of indoctrination and manipulation. And I just had to write a paper for an education-based paper, and it was orientated around how learning technology influences current and future educational practices. And I think, we don't really have to write a paper on that. I'm not really interested so much in that particular paper, but I have to do it as part of the program, and I'm getting paid to do it. But, in essence, people are now spending most of their time, as I'm doing right now, kind of ironically, on technological devices, TikTok, Instagram. These big tech corporations and not for monetary reasons, it goes deeper than that. On the surface level, it's from the business end of things. Companies like Nvidia, Microsoft, Zoom, Skype. Skype is obviously a subsidiary of Microsoft, but their share prices are going through the roof because we're using technology every single day. But the aim is more sinister than that. They want people to lose touch with socialization, with traditional value sets, which is why religion has been consistently attacked for probably the last couple of decades, at least since the 60s in Western Europe. The aim is to separate people from family. And once you separate people from family, especially the youth, especially the coming generations, you adopt them under state protocol. So you can take numerous examples of this, the Stasi, secret police in the Soviet Union, the Gestapo, the Hitler Youth in National Socialist Germany. There's no difference with the system that's at play now. They use things like climate change and spray your hair pink and take loads of piercings and be very promiscuous, and that's what they're telling the youth. There's literally pornography in schools in the United States and the United Kingdom, and that's been in there for a while. They teach children things that are obscene to essentially create a Stockholm Syndrome style effect where the youth become reliant on the state, and they see the state as a savior figure, very Nietzsche, philosophically speaking. And the state will always provide for them, and the state in essence replace the parent, they replace the family. And that's already been happening for a very, very long time with respect to welfare, and how in any real true free market capitalist system, people shouldn't get handouts, they should have to work for it. But in the West now, the government literally keep people alive by paying them salaries that in effect are worth more than what someone makes working a day job. Why would someone work 9 to 5 cleaning a toilet, let's say, when they can make maybe 60-70% of that salary by doing nothing and claiming unemployment benefits from the government? The whole thing is created so that people become reliant on government, so that the government can turn around tomorrow and say, okay, well, if you don't do what we say, we're going to take away your benefits, we're going to take away your healthcare, we're going to take away your housing, we're going to take away your livelihood, and if you have children, their livelihood by default too. And China's taken it to the next step, and as I've already reiterated multiple times, there is no China, there is no the United States, there is no India, there are no countries in the world. They're all controlled by the same centralized financial body, period. That's not a non-objective statement. If anyone wants to do research, you can go and find out yourself. It's very, very simple, and that's been the case for many hundreds of years. Without going on too much of a tangent, I need to cut myself off sometimes. That's the essence of what's happening right now, and people really need to look and they need to think, what substance to support a breakdown of the system do they have? I mean, what reserves is a better adjective to use? When the system goes down, which we've seen from the financial crash in 2008, we've seen from the crashes in 2019, 2020, 2021, all of which are artificially inseminated, and all of which will come about to a greater degree in the not too distant future. By 2030 as an absolute, the EU already published their policy, the 2030 Agenda, which is super communist, super totalitarian. And the expectation is that there'll be events within 2025. And to give people an idea of how all of these things are planned generations in advance, everything is numerological. And this is something that perhaps won't engage with most people because it's very complex and it requires a lot of reading and understanding and a mindset that challenges everything that you see. But Donald Trump, just like any president or political figurehead, they're all puppets. They're not real characters. There's no such thing as an election. Everything is pre-approved, pre-rigged. It's not real, okay? But when his election finishes, one of the Kennedys is likely to take the next US presidency, which is exactly 66 years after JFK was assassinated, which is the man's father. And 66 and 33 are numbers that are very important to the status quo. 33 degrees of Freemasonry. The occultist agenda is ascribed to numerological patterns which go back thousands of years. Everything is set in a calendar form decades, even potentially centuries in advance. And people can't really comprehend that because they see the patterns on the street and they think those that are around them are as organic as those that govern. The people that govern are not people like, Presidents Trump, Biden, these characters, not even businessmen like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, who aren't real either. They're all characters. Jeff Bezos didn't create Amazon. Elon Musk didn't create Tesla and PayPal, or is involved with PayPal. These people are just characters. They're all puppets. They're for the TV. It's all a show. But what is not a show is the fact that their agenda no longer requires a labor-intensive market. When you think about how advanced technology is now, when you think about the infinite amount of wealth that exists in a measurable formula, so someone has 50 billion, someone has 100 billion of net assets, that's nothing. In the grand scheme of things, it's the people that produce and create money, which is now digitalized. So, instead of having stacks of $100 bills in your basement or your garage or in the local bank or in a reserve in a safe deposit box, it's just digits on a computer, which can be manipulated at all times of the day by someone that isn't essentially liable to investigation, just like the Vatican Bank. It's something that isn't checked up on. The word I'm looking for, I've forgotten. But because we're no longer required as a mass population to suffer to their needs, to promote their constructions, their expansions, why would they want to share the world with us, right? So I think the next agenda that we're going to see off of the back of the whole COVID demo, which was a test run, is probably a cyber attack, which they're building up for, constantly talking about it. There's going to be a cyber attack from China, a cyber attack from Russia. It's not China, Chinese or Russian cyber attack, it's just a cyber attack as a whole, because if you want to eradicate the current economic system, all you have to do is press delete. One cyber attack will wipe out everyone's bank accounts, it will wipe out everyone's pensions, and then people become more reliant on the state, which I've talked about a lot before. And this is something that's happened, say Bradford and Bingley Bank crashing 10, 15 years ago. Banks crash all the time, every day. People lose their savings, right? But think about something on a global level, a global blackout, if you will, where everything goes down, all networks go down, and all you're left with is the government to give you your paper handouts. Similar to the post-World War II system in the UK and much of Europe, where people were given food rations, or in the United States, where people are given food rations during the COVID period. That's what they're transitioning to. They're going to remove money from the equation, all forms of money, whether digital or physical, and it's going to be replaced with a tokenized social credit system, which China has already adopted. which essentially means that you get rewarded with things that you need if you essentially sponsor the state narrative. If you don't sponsor the state narrative, like in China, and you spend your credits or in early form money on things like, let's say, alcohol or going to the cinema, going to the movies, having fun, traveling, instead of investing in books and materialistic items that sponsor the local economy, your social credit file goes down. And the social credit file is no different to a standard credit file that you get when you have a credit card. The only thing is it will directly and openly, publicly restrict your ability to advance within society. So it's essentially the ultimate class system, like you had in India 20, 30 years ago, where you have the untouchables. You have this system of people that have and people that don't have based on their racial pigmentation. Albeit this system, it might not be exactly to that exact style, but it will conform to an agenda which puts people in a pyramid more openly. Not that that's not the case today. We have those that have and that are immune to any kinds of investigation, immune from being investigated by the judiciary for all kinds of offences. But this system will be more brash. It will be straight up for everyone to see, super honest and adopted by everyone. And before I go on a rant and my articulation becomes poor, that's the video for today. And I just want people to know that that's what's going to be coming, and that you should, make reserves for that, whether it's food stocks or water stocks, without inducing fear like what the media do. That this is a reality, right? If there's a cyber attack and you lose all your funding, all your savings, and the banks go down, and you live in a city tomorrow and there's no electricity, which we've seen numerous times. In fact, that's the case in many places today, like Dhaka here in Bangladesh. Electricity goes out from time to time. What happens when it just doesn't come back on? Everything is controlled by an electrical grid, even the water supply. If people aren't getting paid, no one's going to check that the water is safe to drink, the electric's safe to drink, that things are working and functioning, and it's going to be absolute anarchy. It's going to be like the ultimate financial collapse. People come running to the market when everything dips so that they can buy back in. And that's what's going to happen when there's a global physical anarchy at play, but it's going to be much, much worse. And that's how they reintroduce a new order and they reset society, which they've been so often talking about. The New World Order is a word that they created and they demised, not something that's conspiratorial. It's an open public agenda that's at play. And published documents like what the European Union's been talking about with respect to the 2030 agenda are just some such examples that highlight what it is they intend to do to pivot society to the next realm. But I'll leave it at that. All the best.